If you're a lawyer or law firm or legal adjacent and you're interested in podcasting or sponsoring, reach out to Clerk at legalpodcasting.com.
All right. Welcome back to New Jersey Criminal Podcast.
Thank you.
I have the pleasure of having a little late breakfast this morning with Christian Barth, author, attorney, photographer, screenwriter, man of the day here. And Christian and I had a wonderful conversation back in January of 23. I can't believe it's been a couple years ago, back when we were audio only here on the New Jersey Criminal Podcast. And we spoke then in great detail about his extensive research that culminated in his book, The Garden State Parkway Murders. So I would encourage our listeners to go back and listen to that 3-part series. Christian's down here on vacation, and we decided to meet, I guess, at the scene of the crime, as they say. We're here at the Summers Point Diner. And Christian, I think this is the last known place that Elizabeth Perry and Susan Davis were seen just over 55 years ago, before they were found murdered between exit 31 and 32 on the Garden State Parkway. So we thought we'd meet here. We've been talking about getting together in person, and I'm happy to meet you in person finally, and to hear about what you're working on next. So
Great. Thank you.
So I guess I have to ask you first, any updates since the book was released? I know when I interviewed you, you did share with us a couple things that you had learned since the publication of the book. But I'm curious if anything has come up since then that you're able to share with us in terms of either research or tips or leads.
Not that I'm really able to share fully. You're right, there have been some developments. I hate to be sort of circumspect, but I want to respect the confidentiality of people as well. But I wouldn't say there's any developments that I've been made aware of. I will tell you that, it's my understanding that DNA, the evolution of DNA, continues to be at the forefront of police science, for lack of a better term. So they're constantly testing the DNA to see if there's any new hits, given the technological advancements of it at the Perry Davis crime scene. But there's obviously been no matches, per se.
I thought about this when I was re-listening to our conversation. I'm assuming that there is still some evidence in the possession of law enforcement such that they could test it if they found some sort of DNA match?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Talk to me about what you're working on now, if you're able.
So I'm working on, my original intent was to write a true crime book similar to the Parkway Murders. It took place in Wildwood in 1970 about the murders of several women ranging from the year 1970 to 1986. 50%, I'd say a third of the way through that, I'd say 50%. And what happened then, which is sort of this jarring realization for me, is that as time goes by, a couple things happen. First of all, a lot of the detectives that were working on cases back then have since passed away. So that's made it more difficult. And similarly, the ability to access any information, regardless of how old the case, from the prosecutorial agencies, like the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office and the Cape May County Prosecutor's Office, has proved exceedingly difficult. So that being said, I've moved this into fiction format, and made it based, fictionalized version of other cases, from the 70s and whatnot. I'm not putting on a particular case or anything like that. I believe fiction, also my first book, The Origins of Infamy, can assist in solving cases. Anything that gets the conversation flowing again about the case, whether it's true crime or not. It's always going to be helpful. So it gets people talking. And I think that's, a year or two ago, I brought suit against the Atlanta County Prosecutor's Office in Superior Court for failure to adhere to the Open Public Records Act request that I made for access to the Davis Perry files, which are in the possession of the Atlanta County Prosecutor's Office, and they summarily denied me any access whatsoever. I, since that time, made another OPA request for the Carroll Hill case.
Down in Cape May County.
Down in Cape May County. And all I asked for, because I knew it was going to be rejected for the other things, all I asked for was the coordinates of where the body was found. Because the paper said 75 feet here, another paper said 75 feet by the edge of the water, and they wouldn't even turn that over. So, in doing a lot of it, I fail to see where that does any good towards solving a case at all with a case that old. I mean, the prosecutor's office says every once in a while they'll do an interview with the paper and say, any new leads, call, but I do believe there's somewhat of a two-way street there. And I have spoken with myriad detectives, with law enforcement agencies around the country. And I said, let me ask you a question. This case is how many years old? Why are they not letting me see this? And I said, would it be fair for me to conclude that a lot of that is ego-driven? In other words, the prosecutors don't want these solved unless it's on their watch. And they all said, absolutely. Every detective I spoke with. That's a very troubling concern of mine. The fact that something like that would be stopping the dissemination of information that I'm trying to convey in a book to get out to the public, to share with them the story, to give it context, what happened. Maybe I write a book and someone says, oh, I know a certain person that was there in the area. They can call the police that
Triggers
way.
new leads.
Triggers new leads.
And, we spoke about this the last time, that I interviewed you, and we talked about how there is an exception to the Open Public Records Act for active investigations, right? So it's not surprising, I would say, that your requests were denied. Now, the rules, at least in New Jersey, as they pertain to OPA, were changed a little bit recently. I don't know if that's affected you at all, but it hasn't gotten you access any more than you would have gotten before.
Enlighten me, because I didn't hear of any changes. Hold on one second.
Yep. So let's just start back up again.
Okay.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of Oprah, I guess really, one of the things I wanted to just focus on was, if you want to do a story justice and you want to get to the heart of the truth, right, and provide a nonfiction book that is accurate, as detailed as you can get, you need good facts. And this wasn't just something that you whipped out in a weekend. You spent a decade plus of your life researching this, and speaking, to just about everybody that you could. That's a lot of work. Why do it?
Just fascination with the case, an interest. The deeper you get into it, the more you're committed to it. It makes no sense to get into a project, a couple years in, and then, the thing with the Parkway Murders is every instance I was always coming across a revelation that I didn't know. These things began, like the Gerald Stano, really the 6 degrees of separation. There's so many connectors with the case, which are both eerie and ironic, that continue to move me forward. The connection with, the main suspect, Mark Thomas, growing up with Gerald Stano. And these are things that I found out on my own just by talking to, people in Pennsylvania and
Right.
whatnot.
It's like any case, though. You probably at some point feel like you're going down a rabbit hole,
Right.
but not really knowing if those rabbit holes are going to lead you to
Yes.
an answer. And so, just the number of people that you spoke with for your book, I found just overwhelming and impressive. But there's got to be an end point, right? You probably have to make a decision at some point
Right.
that you've exhausted everything that you can do, and it's time to close down the computer and print the book. How did you come to that point?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I had pretty much had my narrative arc. I knew where it wanted to begin, where I wanted to begin, where I wanted it to end. And it's fascinating is that my parents met about 200 yards from here. It was called Maynard's back. You have a circle here.
Well,
And then
Tony
you-
Mart's, you mean?
No,
Maynard's, isn't Maynard's
Maynard's is the
in a
crab
market?
trap.
Oh, okay. Got
it's
it.
crab trap.
Okay.
So there's sort of that interesting angle. If it were not for them, or that place, I wouldn't have been here. And the circle, and the girls were last seen at the circle. So all these little connectors, which I sort of interpreted sort of at a different level. Like maybe this is some sort of fate-driven way to make me do this.
Well, you first learned about the story from your mom and dad talking about it on the ride
Right.
home from the shore one time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So this area has always fascinated me. So it took a long time, but also, I'm working 4 days a week. So we are raising children. So it's time consuming. And I don't work I don't write full time. I wish I could, but I instead, I'm practicing law and doing things like that. So that's a contributing factor, obviously. The other things that go on with life to why it took so long. And every time I would come across something so fascinating, just to move me forward, once that came to its natural conclusion, I would find something else that just absolutely astounded me. And I would take that, and that just tended to string until it just came to a point where I decided, well, this is the story. Going from 1969 and then moving all the way into the very last development in the case, which I'm not thinking of offhand, but like the late 80s, with the Bundy, that whole development.
Back to Ocean City.
Yeah, right back to Ocean City. So, and then talking to Bundy's aunt and learning that he was down there and he's been there. So he had offered several times. And then, of course,
You came full circle in your investigation.
Yes, full traffic circle.
Right. It's not there anymore.
I remember I've been doing it so long. I'd spend several afternoons down here when it used to be the traffic circle and there used to be the causeway. Sometimes I would just stand on top of the historic building, the Summers House, the mansion, and just look out on the circle, and just sort of soak it all in. But I've always been fascinated with history. Generally, historical places, more specifically, like we're in the Summers Point diner, the fact that those girls ate here is just chilling to me.
And I don't think much has changed in this joint. So you wonder, you can almost think about how it was that early morning of May 30th, I guess, of 1969 in here. After that was back when this diner was open 24 hours because of all the bars right across from where we're sitting, and those bars spilling over into this diner, and
You also had people from the Dunes, the all-night places coming over. So I'd say one of the interesting, since writing the Garden State Parkway Murders, I haven't lost interest in it. I continue to research it and look up more what I perceive as persons of possible interest or profiles of persons. It's which is fascinating.
You're not the only attorney that has another creative passion. I know so many attorneys that have these other, whether it's writing or acting or music. What's that all about, do you think?
Well, your writing skills become better as you become a lawyer. I think a lot of persons that went to law school had liberal arts majors. They were creative people who, frankly, were having trouble finding employment, so they went into practice law. I figured it's really the natural segue because there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do with a liberal arts degree, short of going to graduate school. So that's what people do.
There's a lot of attorneys out there nodding right now when you say that.
So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of that goes into it. Yeah. People probably, if you're a creative person, you're born creative, you're going to die creative, and your life will be creative. You have to give that an outlet. There are a lot of people, I think, who suppress that.
Right.
I know when my father passed away, he was a lawyer in Cherry Hill. Strangely, and I love my father to death,
I didn't know your dad was a lawyer.
Yeah. He was president of the Camden County Bar back then, estate planning. And it's weird. I don't even know if I should mention this part. It's just very freeing, I guess, the expectations of your parents, what you should do. So my mom used to work for the Edge of Night soap opera way back in the early 60s as a production assistant.
So you came from a family of artists?
No, not at all.
No?
It's the exact opposite.
Okay.
It's true. So my dad, no artistic passions, desires, but I did. So, I had always had that. I mean, I lived in Hollywood for a year. I was too immature to see that through. So in my 30s, I just said, I began writing something just on a whim. And reading writers. I'd encourage anyone who wants to do that to read their favorite writers. And
you like really Updike, right?
John Updike, Rabbit at Rest, William Steyer and the Confessions of Nat Turner. And believe it or not, a little Philip Roth, who would seemingly not be that sort of a segue, but I mean, that and then just like, oh my God, it's the first time I ever laughed out loud was at John Updike.
Yeah.
I hadn't read any of the real literary authors until then. But you just sort of fall in love with the writing and try yourself. And I just enjoyed it so much. And I remember being in a class at Rutgers University, and there was a short story idea. Then I just immediately popped into my head about the Parkway Murders. And then I just decided to write the novel about it. And then after that, I had gathered so much information.
That was a first-person fictionalized account from a Bundy? Okay.
Yeah, and then I just decided to move forward with that and get more and more information, which I did. And then that's when I started to find the connections. And I immediately, after that was written, started to do the true crime book. So
yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I've always thought about doing writing some different things, and fiction versus nonfiction. Which do you prefer and why? You started as a fiction writer, and now you've moved obviously into the true crime area. Talk to me about that.
Nonfiction requires a lot more research. You have to have it's like citing a case. Right? You have to have your facts down. I don't think there's as rigid a standard as there is with, say, literary texts, not literary texts, but scholarly texts, like Ron Chernow writing Hamilton. I mean, that's an amazing amount of work, footnoted. You can incorporate your own creative style into it. It's just a different, but it's a little easier, I would say, writing fiction, because if you're come up against something, you have to verify it. Well, maybe I don't have to verify it. I can go into my own interpretation of how this happened. I've always striven or strove, one of the two, toward being as adherent to the general narrative of what happened. With some deviations, obviously, as opposed to just going on a complete tangent of how I wanted the case to be. So I've tried to get a general timeline along those.
Are you troubled by AI?
No,
No?
not at all. I get that question frequently. I mean, I think people will ultimately want to read. If I'm reading a book, I want to read it knowing an author has written it. Okay, I don't think you can replicate that level of it. Because if I'm not, it's like every time I'm reading it, just say, well, this is AI, this isn't the author. A part of the reading process for me and the processing of the language is sort of appreciating that writer sitting down and doing that. And I think ultimately people want to know that this was a creation of the human mind, a product of that,
Right.
as opposed to a computer. Maybe text will go that way. I don't know.
Right. I mean, even the most prolific writers, and you hear about, the number of pages that Stephen King can produce in a day, or, I mean, the few times I've sat down and put pen to paper, it could take me a day to get a good paragraph, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then you don't use it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it is hard work. It's oftentimes thankless work. And only the very fortunate can make a living at it.
Right.
So, with all of that said, I am so impressed with, someone like yourself that wants to and has chosen to, work in a fashion, you said part-time basis, to be able to devote a portion of their life
Right.
to your passion.
Yeah. Well, my family's very understanding.
They must be.
So they know
Right.
that that's my,
Talk to me about your process. Like, how do you? I always am interested in how, when and how writers write.
It depends,
Yeah.
Most of the time I used to be, I'm a morning person, 100%. I mean, I have that bandwidth that just stops at a certain time.
Do you write every day?
I try. I do try. So it just depends on whatever, inspired me. Sometimes it's 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, when everything's sort of settled down, I'll get in 2 hours and then go to sleep. And I keep a notebook, separate notebook, where I write down every thought I have, a journal, and go back and look at that. So something I'm writing and something inspires me, I can jot that down. If I come across a particular verb or adjective,
Something like a little journal.
right, which I feel, really fits well, and I'll, try to use that. So that's the process. I don't have any set discipline there. Maybe that's why it takes me so long too, than some other people. Now, if I was working full time and it was a strict business, obviously, I'd be able to devote much more of my day to it. So I basically snatch time whenever I can, whenever I'm feeling it. I don't write when I'm tired, because nothing's going to come of that. You're just going to be distracted when you're tired. So I just try to be awake, and alert, and when I'm feeling creative, which is typically after I've read a lot, there's something about reading the good writers and your favorite writers.
Do you like to read now?
Oh,
I mean,
all
you've
the
talked
time.
about how you
I love
started.
to read. I love to read.
You reading anything good right now?
I'll read a lot of books over 20
I've done that.
times. My favorite writers, I'll read a lot of books over and over. I've not done anything yet that's new, that grabs me. My favorite contemporary authors I don't read real recent true crime unless it comes very highly recommended. I have a particular era of cases I'm interested. I'd say like late 60s to early 80s, maybe mid 80s, like that. It just doesn't really grab me as a person. I'm not, diminishing the value of those cases. They just don't grab me.
I can appreciate that. I have a special fascination with that 70s time frame.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do I.
I often wonder, we're about the same age, and I wonder if it's just something because it's something that we can kind of remember that time
Right.
frame. And you've obviously focused your attention on true crime here at the Jersey Shore, which is a place that you spent your every childhood year, right? Every summer.
Not every summer, but when I was a child, I did the years. I mean, we had a place when I was super little here. In fact, my dad...
Ocean City?
Yeah, my dad, I was in diapers. My parents had an apartment that was right over Gay Talise's. They had a tailor shop that was there. And then we would go to my grandparents in Stone Harbor, and they had a place. That's where we would go for the most part. And then later, my parents got their own place.
Are you inspired when you're on the beach or by the ocean?
Yeah. Yeah, just so beautiful, so magical. I just love the whole thing. If I could live anywhere, I think I'd live in Ocean City.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as you are, it's plotting.
I digressed with that.
Plotting research, right? So it's plotting,
right.
detailed. It's like almost like preparing for a trial, right? Every detail matters, but you have to figure out how you're going to fit that into your ultimate work. Do you write?
I'm great.
Good,
thank you.
Do you write as you go? Do you document what you've done and then go back to be able to incorporate that into your work?
I use a lot of historical resources. I'm a believer in photocopying. I love printing out, looking at the
You're old
printed
school.
word. Yeah, it just works for me.
Yeah, I've discovered Genealogy Bank.
Yes.
And have you used that?
No,
for
because
newspapers?
it's too. I use the newspapers.com, which is beyond a good resource because it has the newspapers sort of printed as they were at the time.
So does Genealogy Bank now.
Yeah, probably the same company.
It's probably the same, yeah.
But the genealogy, I tend to get lost, and I don't, I'm not 100%. I mean, there's for the Bundy research, I did a lot of it on the genealogy websites.
But you can get down some rabbit holes reading newspapers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So right now you're focused on the two unsolved murders.
2 or 3. I mean, I'm still in the process. I'm leaning greatly towards making this a fictionalized version. I'll just call it it's a novel about Wildwood in the 70s and 80s. That's the best way I would like to characterize that.
You can almost tie those couple of incidents that you described together.
Yes, and it was a fascinating time. Again, when we were in Stone Harbor as a kid, looking back on how I acquired the muse, this is just one of the instances. One night a week we're allowed to go down to Wildwood, to the boardwalk, when parents took us there. My parents were not Wildwood.
Right.
So I remember going down there and just coming on the boardwalk, and immediately it's like this tunnel of light and rides, and then you would just see or smell the caramel corn. That's what always resonates with me over the years. Second you would turn and go on there, and the rides and all those things. I mean, we never went to any amusement places other than that, but we get to do that. We did that for about 3 years, then for whatever reason it stopped. So we didn't get to do that. That always stuck with me. And then I did the Parkway case, and I just loved the fact that there was this 70s and 60s and 80s somewhat. There was a lot of sketchy elements around. That's always fascinated me, the vulnerability of victims, women specifically. Scary time. At the one hand, it's always characterized as, great time, innocence, free love. Those themes tend to always come about when everyone wants to describe it. It was a better time, but I'm like, it's a much safer time now. Cameras everywhere, which I love. If we had cameras back in 1969, we'd have found out who did this.
Probably know who did, yeah.
Exactly.
Right. I like the idea of fictionalizing a story, but in a real place and time. John Grisham doesn't do that. Stephen King doesn't do that. I'm reading a book right now by a good friend of mine, Michael Cotto. He's an attorney in Philadelphia. I'm going to interview him hopefully soon. And he's written 2 books that fictionalize the story of the art theft up in Boston,
right,
and links it back to Philadelphia. And his characters are set between South Florida and Philadelphia.
Right.
The shore, brigantine. It's a neat, really good story. And
you just have to be careful, and that's the thing. And I notice this. I'll read. That's because I'm a writer. I'll read a few sentences at the first page of the book and know right away, this might be the best story ever. If I don't like the writing style, it's not going to be for me.
Yeah.
I remember reading This is right after I was getting into Updike and all those writers. I remember reading Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier. I knew one paragraph in this is going to be the best book I've ever read. It's one of those ones I'll return to constantly. Other writers, it seems I love, but it took me several times, like Cormac McCarthy. He's very stylistic, but once you just start to read and you realize there are books you can read. I process it at several levels. Number one is your literal interpretation, and I've got sort of a subtext going on. Do I like the style and the flow? And if I don't, and if I see any sort of cliches, which I see a lot with a lot of the true crime authors or based on anything, like the South Philly. There's all sorts of stereotypes that I think amateur writers tend to incorporate into their work, not thinking that this is a stereotype. You're ready to stop and think. If you've heard it before, don't use it. That's the way I look at it. There's certain obviously tropes that are out there that are undeniable, but I mean, if it's again, that's what I try to do. Is if I've heard it before, I don't use it. Really describing a scene or what have you.
Yeah, my youngest daughter has to read Truman Capote's In Cold Blood for her summer reading, and the quintessential.
Liked it a lot. Didn't love as much as some people do.
So some people think of that as the quintessential true crime book, right?
Right. You should read. There's a biography about Harper Lee called Nell.
Really?
Her real name was Nell Harper, or Nell Harper.
Okay.
And she grew up in Alabama. Grew up next door to Capote. Next door. The one Harper Lee wrote.
Yes, To Kill a Mockingbird.
And there was always if you read the book, her biography, there's all sorts of, I don't want to say accusations, but that she did a ton of research on Cold Blood. No one knows that. Helped them immensely.
Oh, right. Okay. I had heard that.
So.
That's interesting. Okay, I'll check that out.
Yeah.
I am also wondering, as you're conducting all of your research and not quite sure where it's going to go, potentially, how willing you are to tell people what you're doing for fear of maybe someone. This is the second car from the late 60s that has pulled into this place since I've been here. But in any event, I wonder how willing you are to share that for fear of someone saying, oh, that's great, and then somebody else is going to do a story about it.
Well, you know what? So don't put it on there. I do fear that.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah.
But I also want to be being honest with what I'm working on.
Right.
A lot of people will try. I remember right back when I started writing the origins of infamy. That happened. First of all, I did a scan. Has anyone else written about this? And I read some guy had written a book, not written a book, it's beginning. He had a website, he had like a couple of paragraphs. He hadn't finished it about it. And I'm like, my heart just sunk. I'm like, someone's already done it. Is this a race now? But I didn't let that stop me. Because whatever I was going to write was going to be my version of it, and let the people decide which they like better.
Right, but getting an agent or a publisher to accept it,
That took forever.
Right. What little I know about that world is
the odds are 1 in 6,000.
Right.
Getting a literary agent.
How did you go about that?
I didn't get an. I mean, I actually knew for the Garden State Parkway Murders. I knew just through social media, in particular, very well-known true crime writer, who I had developed somewhat of a rapport with. Got his number. I said, look, here's the situation. I don't know anyone in the publishing business. You know what? I don't know anyone who knows anyone in the publishing business. It's that rarefied a business. It really is. Let me take it back. After The Origins of Infamy, which was self-published, came out, a friend of a person who had spoken to the police at the circle here called me and said, I love your book. I know someone, a local publisher, I want to give it to him to read, and he read it and he loved it. And this is after it was done, and he said, well, what are you working on next? And this just, I say this by way of illustration to show you the heartache and the near misses. So this particular editor-in-chief read the first 10 chapters and absolutely loved it. And he said, I'm going to take this. He said, I usually take, and I was, again, not that far into it, but far enough. And he said, I usually take this to the big boss. About 4 or 5 projects a year that I want to get published.
Are you talking about the Parkway Murders or what you're working on now?
Talking about the garden. No, I'm going back to the origins of infamy.
Got it.
And then the Parkway Murders. So I'm talking about the Parkway Murders.
Got it.
So he had, again, this editor who was introduced to a friend had read it, absolutely loved it, and he said, I'm going to take it to my boss. He usually accepts 4 or 5 of the ideas I bring him. Of those 4 or 5, yours is clearly the best work. All the submissions. So I give it to him. Weeks pass, and I get a call, and he's just like, he didn't think there'd be an interest for a case from 1969. So it was, he says to this day, it was one of his biggest career disappointments.
It's his loss.
Yeah, he went, no, this being the editor, not the president of the company, of the publishing company. So he went and left, and then I just continued to write, and I met, getting back to what I was saying earlier, I met a through social media person, a true crime writer, who's very well known, and wanted to talk to him and say, look, what do I have to do here? And he said, send me over, your query and your first several chapters. And I did that, and he put me in touch with Wild Blue Press, who wrote it, and that's how it happened. So you just have to keep waiting for your break, and it's very, very difficult to do. It really, really is. I remember, and I love telling this story, when my first book was self-published, it's like everyone will want to read your story except those that are in publishing, because they just turn their nose up at it. And there was this big book fair in Burlington County, and I went with my stack of books, and I had a guy who was a reporter for the Inquirer, famous guy. To my right was a woman who was like an adjunct at Rutgers, and she had a traditionally published book. So the true crime, this journalist had written a ton of stuff on the mafia. That was his thing.
George Anastasia.
Yeah. So don't just cut this part out.
But
so he was. I'll put it to you this way: when he learned that I was a self-published book, he just wouldn't even talk to me.
Yeah. There's definitely.
The woman I did. She was very nice. He did, and that always bothered me.
Yeah, it would bother me as well. I can understand that. I think it's one of these things that you devote your life to, right? And it is all-consuming. It has to be, if it's going to be worth its weight, right? And so, I think all writers are probably protective of that work that they've done, because it's part of who they are. It's part of what they're giving up working full-time for, or time with their family for. So, I commend you for that. There's just so many different stories. We were talking before we started recording about an interesting article I had read, Who Killed the Fudge King in Ocean City, which I thought was an interesting local true crime type of story. So there's a lot out there, but you can only do so much. Right. Do you ever think about you started as a young adult in Hollywood? Do you ever think about, or have you had any interest from anyone in turning Parkway Murders into a screenplay?
I did. I already wrote a screenplay on it. The problem with writing a screenplay is, and I didn't know this, I figured you write the screenplay, you get the software, it's done. Now what?
Final Cut, is that what everybody uses these days to write a screenplay?
Now what? What do you do with it?
Yeah.
You don't have an agent in Hollywood, you can't get it to see anyone. There's a million screenplays out there. I loved the discipline. I loved writing a screenplay. It's a lot of fun. It's much, much easier than writing either true crime or fiction. It's much, much easier because you're just trying to put your eye in the camera's eye. I just think of your sense. It flowed very naturally for me. But the problem is you can't really do anything with it. So after I completed the Parkway Murders, I did the screenplay on it. And then, again, the book I'm writing on now. I lost track of what your question was.
Well, I was just talking about, the different stories. I threw out the topic of Who Killed the Fudge King as a potential topic. And there's just so many. I guess really, what I would like to do is stay in touch with you. I also want to continue this conversation, whether it's you and I speaking of it or you talking about it in more detail. This idea of transparency and the idea of being able to access information. I mean, I think the law would have to change. I
completely agree with you.
I can't necessarily fault, the prosecutor's office for following a law that they fully agree with, right? Not revealing something under the guise of it's still an open investigation.
Well, here's the thing, though. They release a redacted version of the Harry Engelmeyer case to a person who was not a law enforcement agent. It took place in 1964. Yet when I try to get access to the Parkway case, I get nothing. Now that does not sound to me like any semblance of transparency. It sounds to me like it's selective transparency, and that I have a problem with. I don't see where a case, by virtue of, if the idea is to get the case solved and bring closure for the families, how does denying access to a person who's going to write about that serve the purpose of that? It doesn't. There's no possible policy. I can see there has to be a time limit, 50 years, 40 years, whatever it is. Most of the people in the Parkway Murders and the witnesses have passed away. So if it's like the evanescence of evidence, if time goes on, the chances of it decrease and decrease. Why wouldn't you bring attention to it or provide a writer to do that to jar more memories? But they just don't want to do that. And again, from what I've spoken with, there's a lot of reasons that I understand that there's the law, but the law needs to be changed because no one is benefiting from that. They will not release it to family members of victims. So when it gets to that level of secrecy, that's the antithesis of transparency. I understand redacting it, all those things. But when you're talking about cases from the 60s and 70s, with the approval of family members, so it's not like you're sensationalizing it or anything like that. When that ceases to be a possibility, and as time moves on, they become more and more reticent to talk to anything again. So,
I mean, before we conclude, I want to give you this platform to tell us or ask the public for any information on anything that maybe you're working on now that someone who may listen to this may be able to provide to you, and how to reach you.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd be able to offer anything of that. I just don't want to get into too many specifics because it's evolving as we speak, what I'm working on.
Okay. Fair enough.
I can, again, if they wanted to reach out to me, they know how to do so.
How do people reach out to you?
I'm at christianbarthauthor.com. I'm sorry, christianbarthauthor.com. They can reach out to me there. I have a Gmail account that's on there as well. So I still get people reading.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was able to reach out to you a couple years ago, and you called me right back, so I appreciated that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think you're right. It does come down to getting to the truth of what happened.
Exactly.
And if people don't do it and people don't care, probably never going to get any answers, and that's very sad for the victims and the victims' families.
Exactly. And I mean, there's another case up in Connecticut that I was working on. I got halfway through, very, very close with the surviving family member. She is denied access. So it's not something that's limited to New Jersey, other states as well. They just, for some reason, they don't want to allow persons without their circle to do it. But if I'm a private citizen and a person who used to be with law enforcement is a private citizen, and they are allowed access to it by way of these, sometimes it gets sensationalized, cold case cowboy units. These old men in cowboy hats go in there and, on the shows and re-review the files. Well, how are they allowed to do that? They've turned in their passwords. They can't see any of the classified stuff, but they're allowed to look at it, but someone else is not. That's selective transparency, in my opinion. So that has to change.
Let's stay in touch.
Okay.
I appreciate you taking time on your vacation to meet me here a conversation today. It's nice to meet you in person.
Definitely.
And I would invite all of our listeners, if you haven't already, to go out now and buy and read The Garden State Parkway Murders, a Cold Case Mystery by Christian Barth. You can check Christian out on christianbarthauthor.com. And I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you.